about it in terms of climate disruption. And I think the solutions are well known. They're not going to be easy, but just imagine what would happen if we don't adopt and implement those solutions. And here may I express my gratitude and praise for Governor Schwarzenegger, because he's clearly identified the fact that we need action which is top down and bottom upwards. I think this is a challenge in which you really need all hands on deck. This is something that requires action by individuals, companies, civil society, governments at every level. And I just want to mention that if we don't take action on climate change, then the impacts are going to become progressively more difficult, and at a point we may cross tipping points or thresholds beyond which action will become more or less futile, and it's not going to help at all. So this is where I am very grateful that we've got two distinguished leaders with us, and I would leave it at that. Please identify yourselves when you have a question, and please make the question short and very specific.
Talk about the need for developed countries in particular to lead the way, as well as developing countries in reducing their climate change footprint. And we have an Australian government that has rolled back a fairly previously quite progressive climate change policy and talked about the fact that they need to protect their own economy from the climate change policy, when they say others aren't on board. What do you say to that? And also, Mr. Schwarzenegger, I'm interested in that, given your experience in California.
I would suggest we have a former private head. He would probably tell you much more and on the basis of much greater knowledge, but I'll turn it over to Governor Schwarzenegger.
First of all, let me just say there's many different opinions on how to go about create a green and sustainable energy future. But in California, while America was kind of at a standstill when it comes to environmental progress, I felt when I was governor that I as a state have the responsibility to move forward in a very aggressive way and not wait for the federal government or not wait for their debates, should there be a carbon tax or should there be a cap and trade, or which way do they want to go about, because the California people were very clear that they didn't want to make it a political issue, conservative versus Republicans, Democrats, or any of those. They felt like we all breathe the same air, we all drink the same water, we all drive on the same roads. There is really no liberal road or no conservative road or liberal air or conservative air or any of that. They wanted to move forward with that, and we did. And this is why California has been more successful than any other state. Because we recognize the fact that it is absolute bogus to talk about that you have to choose between the environment or the economy. As I've said in my speech, that as we were going more green and more clean, the more our economy picked up. Because even though the United States of America does not have as great laws as we have in California, but we are outpacing the United States economy. The United States economy has grown 2.6% last year, and we grew 3.6% in California. So clearly, being protective in the environment actually is also protecting the economy. So you can do both, having a good economy and also a good environment. So that's well, I'm not talking about the Australian government. I never get involved in someone else's issues. Okay, so I'm just telling you the way we feel in California and the way we feel in the United States. Then every country has to do their own thing, and I don't tell them what to do. We are there to help. That's the important thing. The other issue is I think that a lot of the environmental communities always forget to mention is that global warming and the environmental issues are a four-legged stool. We shouldn't just talk about the melting glaciers and the rising sea levels and the beetle-infested trees and the warming of the ocean. That's one issue, and a very important issue that needs to be addressed. But don't forget there's the second leg, which is the job issue. It creates jobs and it stimulates the economy, and everyone loves to have a job around the world, no matter where you go, and loves to have a stimulated economy. The third leg that should not be forgotten is health. As I've said, right now, 7 million people are dying every year because of pollution-related illnesses. In the United States, that number is over 100,000. So that's more in the United States than drunk drivers and suicides and homicides and wars and any other kind of cause of death. So that's irresponsible to just let that go on if we really are there as government to protect the people. So worldwide, that number is 7 million. In India, it's over 1 million alone. So therefore, we have to go and think about that and also communicate that fact. Let the people know, because that's how you make people become part of that crusade and to help us all work together. And the other issue is national security. I mean, there's nothing that is more important than for us to create our own energy. And the way you do that is with renewables. I mean, solar, wind, this is God's gift. And it's a gift that keeps on giving. And it gives us the power to power ourselves. So this is the important issues, and this is why a lot of the Republicans, a lot of the conservatives are involved in environmental issues because of the national security issue. And so there's a lot of those issues that need to be addressed rather than just talk about global warming. What is it, something that's down the line, that doesn't affect me right now? No, wrong. All of those things do affect us, especially the pollution that we put out there. As I said, 40 million tons of additional greenhouse gases this year alone. So we got to stop that. And the only way we do it is by all of us working together and to use the approaches I have recommended very strongly, which is the bottom-up approach, where the subnational governments work, the cities, the states, the communities, the provinces, all work because they have the power to regulate or reduce greenhouse gases by 80%, and also from the top down through the national governments and an international agreement. And we have a countdown. It's now 298 days to the France summit. And we have to all do everything that we can, that we do work on that now. Not wait for the last day, but now to eliminate the roadblocks to a Paris summit and to getting an agreement done, because the French government and I think the international community is very interested in walking away with a major victory from that summit, a victory for the world. And let me tell you, I know, Foreign Minister Fabius, very, very passionate man about this subject, very experienced, and he really wants to see a victory. And I told him that I would do everything I can to help France to achieve that victory and that great agreement.
Strongly believe that
Thank
they
you.
take actions to tackle climate change. But what are the options before them? They are also supposed to submit their INDC by June, by September. But these countries are not in a position to state when they would be able to be. They can't stop their emissions. So what are the way out for them when all the countries are together moving towards having a global climate deal at the end of this year? So what you suggest to those countries, and how rich countries would come forward to support those countries?
Thank you. The point that you raise is a very important one. It's the question of what we call differentiation. It is true that the different nations are not all in the same situation, and if we are pragmatic, we have to take into consideration there is a discussion about what is differentiation. And in Peru, for instance, we have found, and it was voted by the unanimous vote, a reading, a wording which can be accepted by the different countries. Okay. Second, it is not very wise to oppose development and fight against climate disruption. Because if you accept climate disruption, you accept development disruption. And therefore, taking into consideration the different circumstances, national circumstances, we have to share the idea that both for rich countries and developing countries, it's necessary to have new techniques and to go step by step and as quickly as possible towards a new economy. And you see that, for instance, in India, decisions have been announced about solar energy, about nuclear energy. It doesn't mean that the national situation is not taken into consideration. Obviously, it has to be taken, and it is taken into consideration. But there is a necessity to evolve. And as Governor Schwarzenegger very eloquently emphasized, it's a very large source for jobs creation. Because what are the main elements of the future growth? New technologies and green growth. That's the place where we must develop. And therefore, we have to combine the two. And finally, obviously there is a question of financing. Because many countries, you know, when you are discussing with some African countries, some other countries say, okay, it's good, but where is the financing? And it's the reason why both public and private, it's not only public and private investors have more and more to turn their efforts into this green growth. It's not only necessary from a solidarity viewpoint or moral viewpoint, it's good business. It's good business, and that is more and more understood. For instance, remember the session which was organized by our friend, the UN Secretary General in New York. You had there a lot of companies, private companies, big private companies, who have understood that more and more it's necessary to invest into this business for all the reasons which have been explained both by Dr. Pachauri and Governor Schwarzenegger.
Let me just add to that. I want to emphasize the fact that actions that reduce or limit the emissions of greenhouse gases also have huge co-benefits. What are the co-benefits? Energy security. I mean, in our country, our dependence on oil and coal is growing to a level which is quite alarming. And therefore, it's important for us to take those actions by which we ensure a much more secure energy future. The other core benefits have already been mentioned. Employment, lower levels of air pollution. Just imagine if we're going to do what the rest of the world has done in terms of ownership of cars, we would have very serious problems. I would much rather go in the direction of those societies where people are using bicycles. And I want to give the example of some countries, the Netherlands being one, where people ride on a bicycle, take a train, carry the bike with them, and when they get down, they're able to use the same bicycle. In Paris now, you've got places where you can lock your bike and, you know, use public transport. So I think we have to think out of the box. And there are win-win opportunities by which you can bring about a much more sustainable future for the 1.2 plus billion people, and God knows how much more we'll grow that live in this country.
So Smita Sharma, I'm a journalist with TV Today Network. Mr. Fabius, while nuclear energy is considered an alternate, clean form of energy, but given the liability concerns in India right now with its domestic legislations, the way India and the US are working around it, apprehensions are that even if they are able to finally find a way through, the cost of electricity generation will go up so much that it will not even be viable. So how much of nuclear energy can really a developing economy like India look forward to in the years? And Governor Schwarzenegger, if you could just perhaps comment on, do you see any significant change as far as the new Indian government is concerned in terms of their attitude towards climate change agreement? Is there perhaps a sign of a greater flexibility ahead of the Paris conference?
Mr. Foreign Minister, if you would like to go first, please.
Obviously, the decision concerning India belongs to the Indian government. The Indian government is perfectly aware of the worldwide situation and is in charge of the interests of the Indian population. So far as nuclear energy, I understand recently the government has decided to triple the capacity of installed nuclear energy before 2025. You know, and I can speak on this issue as French minister, because France is very well known in the field of nuclear energy. Nuclear energy does not entail any pollution in terms of carbon emission. It doesn't mean that it can be the only source for energy. But, you know, every single country has to find a mix. And in this mix, nuclear energy can play an important role.
To get to your question about Prime Minister Modi, I've watched him very carefully when he was Chief Minister of Gujarat. And he was the one that started kind of like a solar revolution there. He came up with the idea of covering the canals with solar panels, and was very, very strong when it comes to environmental issues. We in California worked, as a matter of fact, with Gujarat through the R20, through our environmental organization, to build on a subnational level, build strength. And so I hope, and my dream is that he will continue on with that environmental kind of mentality, since he's now the national leader, and also come with that to Paris, to the negotiations, because he's really the great hope. So I admired him, and I hope that he will continue that way as he has done in the past.
Let me just add something to that. I'll read out something from the message that the Prime Minister has sent for this summit. He says, I am of the firm opinion that India should view the current global focus on climate change as an opportunity to decisively change the quality of life of its citizens. And I know for a fact, it was 7 years ago, he brought his senior officials from Gujarat. At his request, we put together a 2-day training program on climate change. And he also set up a Department of Climate Change. And as you know, the Ministry of Environment and Forests, the first thing that he did after becoming Prime Minister was to name it the Ministry of Environment, Forests and Climate Change.
But you have been clearly some big challenges, as you know, in India. I mean, it's always easy from the outside world to talk and to have recommendations and to make statements and all of this. But just alone, if you think about the amount of people that are dying here every year because of indoor pollution, because of the kerosene, and this is why this Light a Million Lives initiative that Dr. Pachauri has started is so important, to eliminate that and to bring solar panels and different forms of energy to some of those very poor people. And so it's a very challenging place. But again, I think that's why it is so important that the international community works together with India and is also handing and helping, as much as it's important for India to be part of the international community and to work with them. So I think that anything can be accomplished when you have the will there. And you know, in the United States, I see all the time that we in California, we move forward very aggressively, no stone unturned. As I said earlier, even the governor today, Governor Jerry Brown, continues on with the whole thing and said, we're going to reduce our fuel consumption by 50% within the next 15 years. I mean, that is a really, in a way, outrageous kind of a goal. But you know something? California has always met those goals, even though people always say that's impossible. And so I think that nations should learn, because the subnational governments are the laboratories for the nations. So what happens there, and if it works, then they can adopt it in a national way. So like I said, I have great hope for India.
Urmi Goswami from the Economic Times. My question is from Minister Fabius. There is, you mentioned a universal and differentiated agreement. There's also the question of ambition. And as things go, there's a tendency to work towards a common, sort of a lowest common sort of level of ambition. What is France doing to ensure that the ambition is raised? I know there's the issue of assessment, assessing the contributions, which is a big political issue. How are you working against it? There are countries, including India, which are not in favor of assessments. What is France's view on that, and how are you trying to ensure that ambition is raised?
You know, the role of the presidency is not to impose its own views, and even if it was my idea, it would be impossible. You have to be impartial, you have to listen to everybody, but you have to be ambitious. The ambition has been put and it has been defined, particularly in the COP20. It's to stay under 2 degrees. It is not easy, but it's our ambition. Some countries are saying, and I'm thinking in particular about small islands, well, it will be better, it will be 1.5 degrees. But, okay, but we stick to the 2 degrees, which is accepted by the international community. Now, about the INDC, so-called INDC, and the assessment, once more, it has been defined in the final conclusion of COP20. There will be an aggregation of all the INDC by the Secretariat in November, but we know that many of the INDC will be published in March, in April, in May, in June, and no doubt that some NGO and some think tanks will make their own calculations. And nobody could prevent that because it's the way it is. But it is true that some countries say, okay, it's the first time that we are publishing our INDC, and it's a very important move because it makes it objective. And we were discussing with Dr. Pachauri and Governor Schwarzenegger, it would be very interesting if sub-national entities could publish their commitments as well, and economic sectors and private companies, because the idea is to aggregate all that and to see exactly where we stand. Now, it's the way we shall approach this question this year.
My question is for Mr. Fabius, and it's on the recent agreement between the US and India on civil nuclear. I wondered whether that makes you more optimistic about the ability of French companies like Areva to come to India and start building reactors. And my second question is on the Rafale jet deal, and whether you can give us an update on that deal and when you expect to conclude that deal.
Sorry to say that, but I don't make a confusion between my role as president of the COP21 and the fact that I'm a member of the French government. Therefore, I have been given the opportunity to see Prime Minister Modi this afternoon. We shall discuss different subjects. But when I'm here as future chairman of COP21.
But surely you can answer the nuclear question, since nuclear energy is vital to restricting and mitigating emissions.
Okay, I've said that in the program which has been delivered by the Indian government, there is a perspective, important perspective in nuclear energy, and obviously everybody knows that France is highly competitive in that sector. But I will not comment on.
But does it make you more optimistic about, the French business?
I'm afraid we'll have to end now.
So one last question.
I'm sorry. I think they've got other things to